All right, we'll be talking about the most recent injury update around Josh Giddey, and we're also going to be looking at if the Chicago Bulls have an identity. So this is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you have found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. And so today we're looking at the most recent injury update around Josh Giddey and what his status is going to be for this upcoming game against the Philadelphia 76ers. And we're also going to be looking at if the Chicago Bulls have finally found an identity on the offensive and the defensive side of the ball. And so before we go ahead and jump into the content for today, I first wanted to remind you that, look, 72.9% of you that watch are not subscribed to the channel. So make sure that you go ahead and you slam dunk on that subscribe button, because it means a lot to us here at Bulls Digest as we try to reach our end of the season subscriber goal. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the content for today. And so starting with Josh Giddey and his status in this upcoming game against the Philadelphia 76ers. And so it looks like that he is going to be out. He was out last game and he was listed with a wrist injury. I think that this is more so about just making sure that Josh Giddey is rested and ready to go for this upcoming play-in situation against the Miami Heat on Wednesday. I do like what the Chicago Bulls are doing here. I just think that the bottom line here is that with the Philadelphia 76ers, this is a team that is probably focused more so on this upcoming NBA draft. And obviously, here with the Chicago Bulls, we're focused on this play-in situation. And so, this is something that I think he's been dealing with. And I think it's something that he's probably going to have to just continue to push through as the Chicago Bulls continue their season. And so, with that being said, just looking at the stats for Josh Giddey and just reflecting on what he's been doing so far with the team, I just think that the bottom line here is that he's shooting the basketball with a ton of confidence from downtown. You see that he's shooting 37%. And then the field goal percentage at 46%, I think it really doesn't tell just the true story for what Josh Giddey has been doing offensively. I just think that the game is slowed down for him. And then I just think that he's been so crafty with the way that he's scoring the basketball. I think his ability to really draw contact, get defenders in the air, get to the free throw line, I think that is something that he's certainly benefited from. And I think that he's got the defense guessing a bit more because he's knocking down the three-point shot. And so that's certainly opened it up offensively. And then I just think with the rebounding, we know what type of energy that he brings there. That's been huge for the Bulls. And I just think that as an assist, man, really just setting the table for the Chicago Bulls, it almost feels like that's even been on another level here for us since he's really kind of taken over a lot more since Zach LaVine has moved on via the trade. And so, just got to give Josh Giddey some credit here, which leads me into the second part in talking about if the Chicago Bulls have really found an identity with this basketball team. And I think that, that's one of the things that I was wondering about. And I think that was one of the things that I'm thinking that this team has to do in order to take some major steps moving forward. And I think that for the most part, offensively, I do feel like that this team has in fact taken another step. And just going back to what Erik Spoelstra had to say after the game in which the Chicago Bulls beat the Miami Heat. And here's what Erik Spoelstra is saying, and just kind of paraphrasing this, but he was talking about just how the Bulls were relentless in this game and just talking about how it's tough to take a break physically or mentally because the Chicago Bulls are playing at this pace. And, just really talking about the Chicago Bulls and how they impose their will on the game with this pace. And so I think that leads me to just really point number one with why I think that the Chicago Bulls have somewhat just really found an identity here. Because when you look at this backcourt and you look at what Josh Giddey and Coby White have done, I think that these guys have really embraced the way that Billy Donovan has wanted this team to really play. And I think that they've really found something over the last course of the season. Obviously, I want to see what this team is going to do moving forward with this play-in situation, maybe the playoffs. But I want to see also, too, does this translate over into the next season, because I do think that there's the real possibility that this does, because with this pace and the way that they're playing, they're getting more possessions. And I think that that is something that this team, the way that it's built, it's certainly been favorable. And I think that this is something that they can certainly get even better with, especially as they continue to add to the personnel on this team. And then next up, when you talk about the fact that they're moving the ball at such a high pace, I just think that the baskets are going to start to become even easier for this team because of this pace. I think as they cut down the turnovers, I think now you're going to start to see a team that can really take off in the fast break game. And that's why I think that when you see, this young core, Modest Buzelis, you're seeing Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, these guys are really starting to get it. And I think that these guys are going to really benefit the most with this style of play, because the fast breaks, the way that Josh Giddey, the way that Coby White and these guys have been attacking right now, it's opening it up for everybody else. And I mean, it's not just what they're doing on the fast breaks. Like, even when they're getting downhill and their misses, it seems to be good misses, because you see Julian Phillips coming in, skying in and getting dunks. You see Zach Collins coming in, cleaning up things, and Vooch as well. Like, it's been perfect with the way that the pace and the fast breaks have worked out. So those are two reasons why I like this identity with the Chicago Bulls, and something that I think that they can continue to add on. And in fact, just looking at this last game, just an example, I know it was against the Wizards, but still 21-6 in fast break points. If you can do that, during the course of an NBA season consistently, like, you are going to give yourself a chance to win a lot of basketball games, which leads me to the next point. And talking about the three-point shooting, like, I think that the fact that the offense has changed and really opened it up, for everybody to get these three-point shots. We're no longer in situations where we're into like kind of these grinded out type of games. And I think by doing this is another thing in which you say, okay, this Chicago Bulls team has an identity. And I think the next step, offensively for this team is going to be able to put together, I think, some better half-court sets, because the game ultimately does slow down in the playoffs, and you're going to have to execute a little bit more there. That's something I do want to see with this team thus far, with this offensive identity. But so far, with the offense, I think that we're trending in the right direction. And I think that really now the bigger question, and I think one of the major steps to go for this team, is going to be defensively. And I think that when you look at the defense, it starts with a player like Ayo. I think that when Ayo gets back, I think that that is definitely going to give us some more on the defensive end. And I think that that's really where you start to see a team become really elite. When you start to get not only an offensive identity, but you also get that defensive identity. And I don't know what it's going to be for the Chicago Bulls. Is it going to be a team in which, look, we are tough to really get around from the perimeter standpoint? Is it going to be a team where we develop where it's just tough to get baskets inside? Hopefully you get a team that has a combination of the two. But I do think that, look, when you look at Ayo, this is certainly going to give us an added punch defensively next season. So I can't wait to see what is going to happen when you add him back into the mix with the way that this team has been playing with that identity on the offensive end. I'm hoping that that kind of mixes well with what we need to do defensively. And I do think that now that you see what has gone on with Modest, and just knowing that, look, if you don't have, a top 5 pick or whatnot, there is still a chance to do what you did last season with Modest Buzelis. I think you're still going to get a great player, and hopefully you get a player that has that motor, because that is another thing that I really want to see with the Chicago Bulls. It's going to be, do we have that type of swag? And when I think about that, I think of Modest Buzelis, and he reminds me a lot of what we used to see with Joakim Noah. And I think that that is also like another key ingredient for a team really turning the page. I think defensively, you have that it factor. And I think that Modest is showing us that he is certainly going to be one of those guys. You pair that with Ayo, I can just see that if this team can go out and get them, another wing, maybe another center or something like that, somebody in the front court that has that type of mentality, I think that you're also going to see that shift on the defensive end to go along with the offensive end. Suddenly this team starts to trend even more in the right direction. direction. And so anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here. Do you feel like that, yes, the Chicago Bulls, look, they do have an identity offensively that you think is sustainable? And also, too, defensively, are you in agreement that, look, that is probably the next really step for the Chicago Bulls, is that defensively they've got to get a lot better? Don't get me wrong. I love the effort that we're seeing from this team. I love the fight that we're seeing from this team, because that certainly translates. But I think that we're probably like maybe a player or two away defensively to kind of changing the way that we play defense and maybe getting some more stops and things like that. But I do love what we're doing, like I said, with what we're doing with the man situation and then switching back into zone with the personnel that we have. I just feel like that this team can take another step as we upgrade the personnel and continue to give our young core an opportunity. And lastly, too, let me know what you guys are thinking about Josh Giddey sitting out. And so, look, as we always say around here, go Bulls, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, peace.